Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat here today with my review of the debut episode of Housing Complex C. Housing Complex C debuted last night at midnight on Adult Swim slash Toonami. Now, I'm going to basically do what I normally do when I do these quick reviews. I'm going to start with things I liked about this episode, then go into things I didn't like as much about the episode, and then tie it up with a big old bow at the end. So, first thing I really liked about this episode is generally not as much how the plot set up, but how the atmosphere is set up. Because there is a very strong mysterious aura around Kurosaki so far. Like, you set up the whole mysterious vibe of the cellar where there's all this weird old stuff, and there's this artifact, and that's where the neighbor's son hangs out at night, and also all the drawings he has in there, and also the whole mysterious vibe of these fishermen that don't really quite seem right in a way. And also add to the fact that this is demographically a bizarre community. Not as much for Japanese standards, but if you're watching this as an American or for most of the world, this would seem really bizarre how the overwhelming majority of people in this community are elderly. That's pretty common in Japan. I can go into the whole issues with their demographics, not enough young people, graying, and how the Japanese population is actually decreasing right now. But that's not that weird. But if you, what it reminded me of is an American movie from the 80s, a sci-fi movie called Cocoon, mostly because of how the cast was disproportionately old in that movie. Also, is the one movie people know Wilford Brimley for outside of the commercials where he said diabetes. But I digress. But again, I just love how the atmosphere is set up. And another thing I really liked about this is just the sheer bizarreness of the main character, Kimi. Kimi, as you can see in this picture, actually, this was from the promo of the next episode, is a very oddball girl. Not just in her personality, but in her own presence. Because again, this is a very old community. The overwhelming majority of the residents, native Japanese residents we've seen, are older people. And even the fishermen are at their youngest in their 20s. So it's not like they're that young. And the only young person is her new friend, the girl of the manager of the fishery, Yuri. But outside of that, you also have a very, like I said, eclectic personality. Like, first things first is her concept, her reaction to the cellar. She was really into being in the cellar, and although she briefly got spooked by the dead, dried out dog, she was into it enough to scare Yuri with it later. And it's really hard to describe her other than just oddball. And even she's very eccentric in how she acts. She's very oddball. She's very off the wall to the point where the old people keep saying, "Oh, poor Kimmy. Oh, poor Kimmy." Like this very young, energetic girl compared to these slower, more relaxed, curmudgeonly old people. And also added to that, other things I like about this episode is the fact that we're one episode in out of four, and although in the it helps the mysterious vibe that we really don't know who to trust yet. Because you look around, the main character acts weird, and although it's pointing to this is your heroine, this is your heroine, especially with the in media res shot at the beginning of the episode where she and Yuri get chased by one of the fishermen and Yuri's father kills the fisherman, it's still like this is a weird girl who jumped off the balcony because it's a cool optical illusion by standing in front of the railing. And also the whole thing that she looked, saw these weird fish monster people, was like, optical illusion! And then just like went on her day. And outside of that, you have Yuri, who seems to be just a normal girl who has to move to the middle of absolute nowhere. But again, like the ending scene for the ending scene you see at the during the end credits shows Yuri to maybe not be so reliable. And also you have the weird fisherman where it feels like they're about to do something, but every time it's like, oh, they're going to do something weird. They're going to do something monstrous. They end up not. Like, for example, you had the big guy who just stood awkwardly, but then he was the one who saved Kimi by catching her from jumping off the balcony. And it's like, oh, he's acting weird. It's like, no, it's because he doesn't understand the language and he's trying to communicate. They have later the awkward sound coming from their room, and it turned out that they were just praying to Mecca. So that's gonna be another thing too, like the whole culture clash of the old, stubborn Japanese population and the younger Middle Eastern men, fishermen moving in who don't quite, who are pointing at them like, these guys, watch them later, they're gonna do weird stuff. And again, maybe they do, maybe they don't. You have Yuri's father who's on the phone. Who is he calling? Is he planning something? And outside of that, you had the, well, looked like to be the son of one of the neighbors. One of the only other few younger people appeared to be a hikikomori teenager who's really into Cthulhu-esque eldritch monsters that he kept drawing. And you see that he was unpersoned at the end of this first episode. Whether it was a forced unperson or self unperson remains to be seen. But that's something that was the little twist at the end of this episode. And all this stuff, I not only really like, but it's the type of thing that you're speculating on, you're talking about, you're asking questions, you're making predictions about the future. Which, considering this is more not as much a horror show as much as a mystery show, is really the absolute best thing to happen. Best thing to do is to be asking these questions. And this show is making me ask questions one episode in. And it's given me a little bit of the vibes of season 1 of The Promised Neverland, where it's like, can you trust this character? Can you trust this character? What's the next twist? How do you outsmart this person? And it's this whole like tick for tact. And if I'm to make, and I guess I've gloated on about how much I like the show, so I'm going to talk about maybe stuff I don't like so much. Maybe just the fact that Kimi might be a little thoughtful. I get it, she's a young girl, and she doesn't have many friends because, again, everyone around her is old, so she kind of marches to the beat of her own drum. She might be a little too eccentric. Like, she reminds me of, like, Fena in the first couple or so episodes of Fena Pirate Princess when she was more of this lonely teenage girl who really marched to the beat of her own drum to the part where maybe it got a little grating, especially if you have to bounce it off of a more straight man character. Like, for example, Fena Pirate Princess, the straight man character was Yukimaru. And in this show, so far, it appears to be Yuri's going to have to be like the straight man to the wackiness that is Kimi. Maybe a little too oddball. And outside of that, I really can't find too many like big complaints aren't just nitpicky. Maybe the fact that they've so far kind of overused the whole concept of something is going to happen, and then all of a sudden, nope, false alarm, which is really a horror trope. Used to be like a subversion of it's gonna be scary, and no, it's not. But now it's almost a trope. Now, when you expect something scary happening, like okay, it's gonna be some type of weird false alarm. And so far, that's what the show's had. But again, it's episode 1 out of 4. That's another thing I like about the show. They're not building that like extensive of a plot. It's not like this whole thing where you are like building this whole universe. They're building an atmosphere, but they're not like layering too much information. We know a little bit about the old people and about some more important old people. We know a little bit about Kimmy. We don't even know too much about Kimmy, honestly, other than she's really, really weird. Marches to the beat of her own drum. And that's a good thing. Because again, this is 4 episodes. You can't spend that much time on developing characters because you just simply don't have the time to. And it's something it's already doing a better job of than the Fully Cooley sequels, where the Fully Cooley sequels really tried to shoot for the moon and stars and like building these multi-layered characters when it didn't really ever have the time to do so. So I give credit to Housing Complex C there. And if I had to make one prediction about the future, and this is my twist, and that's another thing I wrote down when I was watching this last night. Kimmy reminds me so much of Akane Shinjo of SSSS Gridman. As in, she's this kind of little weird girl, seems to be all nice and friendly, but you just know there's something messed up with her. As in SSS Gridman, this really wasn't a tightly guarded secret in SSS Gridman, but Akane Shinjo was the main antagonist, one of the main antagonists of that show. She was not one of the good guys. And outside of that, not one of the main good guys. And it feels like Kimmy's knows something. It feels like she's aware of the fish monster. She's aware of the weird, mysterious stuff going on. And in a weird way, she might be masterminding this in some weird Saint Elsewhere type way. And she's just luring Yuri into a trap. Or one of those things like this movie from the 80s, this like exploitation horror film called The Pit, where there's this boy who's messed up in the head and he would literally feed people to these like gremlins in a pit in the middle of the woods. And to the out naked eye, it's like, oh, he's just a normal boy, but he's really messed up in the head. And my prediction for the twist is that Kimi is the antagonist of the show. She is the bad guy. She knows something we don't know. And it's going to be up to the old people or probably the fishermen. The fishermen, they're showing all these signs of, oh, there's something messed up with these guys, something messed up. They're going to be the good guys. And it's Yuri's dad who knows something's messed up. And these guys are going to help him solve this because he gets Middle Eastern men because like the native Japanese men were like too scared or like didn't want to deal with this situation. That's my prediction. My prediction is Kimmy's the bad guy. Everything that scares her is fake, and she's masterminding this weird thing because like the fish monsters are her friends. So what do you guys think? If I had to rate this, I like this so far. I'm giving this an 8.5 out of 10. What do you guys think? Leave your comments, leave your opinions down below. I am the Super Orange Cat, and that is all.